Okay, welcome to Mormon Think Tank. I'm Cardinellis, and today we are going to talk about something I would say near and dear to my heart because the gospel is, but I think it is probably the number one thing that is challenging the Mormon Church, aka the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, at the moment that I feel needs to be addressed. And this, being a think tank, is where we think and talk about these things. So what I want to talk about today briefly is the concept of prophets in the modern day. And I want to ask the question, can prophets be wrong? Can modern prophets be wrong? And what does that mean? Now, fundamentalist Mormon parents, don't freak out. This is not an anti-Mormon blog. If you're overhearing this in your children's little headphones, it is okay. This is going to be hopefully an uplifting conversation about a very important topic. Now, currently, I'm about to start a podcast series that is in response to this letter that's been floating around the past 3 to 4 years called Letter to a CES Director by Jeremy T. Runnels that's had a couple of updates in 2015 and kind of been floating around the bloggernacle, as they call it. But this, along with many other anti-Mormon and also questioning Mormon literature, is representative of a very common theme that I see right now. There's a lot of people going inactive, a lot of people having these crises of faith. Hashtag, I am assuming that the plural of crisis is crises. I'll have to look into that after the podcast. But anyway, all these people are having these crises of faith because of things they find out, be it about church history, be it about church doctrine, be it about X, Y, or Z, the Kinderhook plates, the Mountain Meadows massacre, yada, 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 this and that, so on and so forth. And I think what it boils down to is one massive ink blot test. I believe it's called Rorschach test, if I'm botching the name properly. When you look at Mormonism, when you look at what you have been taught, you need to understand how much your interpretation is a manifestation of you as much as it is of the actual ink blot test. So these are just a couple of things I want you to think about before you go inactive, before you freak out, before you have this crisis of faith. First off, let's ask the question, can modern prophets be wrong? Now, I would say yes. Don't freak out. Let's think about that for a second. In scriptural history, there are plentiful examples of prophets being mistaken. We are not the Catholic Church. We do not believe in papal infallibility. Multiple church leaders are on the record as saying we do not believe in papal infallibility. And what does that mean? We do not believe that the leader of our church is either the vicar of Christ or is infallible, meaning impossible or unable to commit error. Let's go over some of the errors of past prophets. Well, the first one I can think of that comes to mind is Noah. He discovered the fruit of the vine. He got so drunk that he came home and passed out on his mattress so badly that he scared his children to death. Read it. It's in the book of Genesis. The next one I think of is Jonah. We all know the great story of the whale, but we forgot, how did he get into the belly of the whale? Well, he didn't want to go preach in Nineveh. Yes, some of it was fear of his own security, but a lot of it was he hated Ninevites. In fact, he hated them so badly that after being in the belly of the whale and deciding to obey God and go back and preach to the Ninevites, he got angry when they converted and they listened to him. Why? Because he didn't want Ninevites in his church. Fast forward a couple thousand years and we meet a guy named Peter, the rock upon which the church was built. In ancient times, the guy who hung out face to face with Jesus Christ ended up denying him 3 times. That's a big fallible error right there. So I'm going to dive into many aspects of church history in the following weeks, many aspects of this letter to a CES director, some other questioning Mormon or anti-Mormon, whatever we want to call it, kind of literature, and questions that people have asked. And the only thing I want to have in your mind as we go forward in this conversation and in this podcast series is the question that ultimately I think goes to the heart of Mormonism. And that is, can prophets be mistaken? And the truth is, yes, they can. But fortunately, we believe that they are correct to such a degree that, yes, following the prophet is a good idea. But we always sustain the prophet. They always ask us to raise our hand, our right hand, and sustain the prophet. And before we do that, there should be some kind of prayer involved. Because at the end of the day, what this gospel is about, and what I would always teach my seminary students every single day, was the number one thing the gospel teaches you is to recognize the Spirit, and then second, to have the courage to act upon its promptings. So at the end of the day, we are weak as a people if we blindly follow a prophet because we believe that's the structure of the church, because it's not. The primary structure of the church is that God gives man revelation. And if he is in tune with that spiritual revelation, the Lord will guide him in the proper paths. And that proper path, if he is blessed to live in modern times or in ancient times, will include a prophet on earth who is an additional guide and mouthpiece of God on earth. It's a two-part process, being a member of the church and being a prophet. If the members are bad and the prophet is good, well, you get Moses and people that took 40 years in the wilderness doing what was, I believe, a 3 to 5 day journey, if you read the book of Deuteronomy. But when the prophet messes up, but the people are good, well, then you might get something along the lines of Brigham Young and the priesthood ban. I mean, the guy was batting 990 when it came to awesome prophetic revelations. Look at the city of Salt Lake City. Look at the American West. Look at some of the most beautiful aspects of church doctrine. And you will see the handprint and the footprints of a wonderfully inspired man, Brigham Young. Did he mess up a little bit on the racial ban? Yes, he did. But fortunately, we're a faith that believes in repentance. And we, as Brigham Young said, do not require blind obedience because we have the Spirit to guide us and to influence us with its light and its personal revelation. So, going forward in this podcast series, the only thing I want you to think about is, first off, your relationship with God, and are you using the Spirit to guide you? And second off, if you're having these bouts or these crises of faith because of, X, Y, or Z thing that you read that we will go over, and, some of them are legitimate concerns that I've seen consistently over the years. You have to think, is your problem with this new knowledge that has come to your attention, is it such a crisis of faith because you've really kind of been a lazy Mormon your entire life and never really looked into it, never thought about it, never prayed about it, so it caught you by surprise? Or is it a legitimate, deep question that you have? And I believe that if you are honestly prayerful and you are honestly meditating, searching, pondering, praying, all of that, that it will do one of two things. Either cease to be a crisis of faith, or you will find the answer. We are guaranteed to have the mysteries of God opened unto us. So anyway, the only thing I want you to think about as we go forward in these podcast series is to think, are prophets infallible? Will I be okay with this idea that maybe there's been some mistakes along the way? And second off, how can I tell what are mistakes and what aren't? Oh yeah, it's the gift of discernment that comes from the Spirit. I need to cultivate the Spirit. And I need to remember that the number one most important thing that all these prophets and all these teachers have ever taught me is to recognize the Spirit. And hopefully, hey, you'll even pray about what I talk about in these podcasts. So anyway, Visit us next week. We're going to dive in and we're going to talk about some of these things. And until then, it's Cardinellis with Mormon Think Tank. Subscribe or die.